From Suffering to Freedom, Buddhist Teachings for the Journey of Life. Chapter 1. The Universal Search for Inner Peace. In every moment of our existence, we are faced with an undeniable truth. Suffering is an intrinsic part of life. As we walk through the seasons of our lives, from the days of youth to the autumn of our years, the inevitability of pain, be it physical, emotional, or existential, often accompanies us like an uninvited shadow. There is no escape from it. We feel it in the deep aches of our bodies, the grief of loss, and the quiet yet persistent fear of aging and death. The Buddha, in his infinite wisdom, named this suffering dukkha, and it is as present in our lives today as it was in the time of the Buddha. Yet here lies the great mystery. What if the answer to alleviating this suffering is not found in the external world, but within ourselves? What if the true path to peace lies in our own minds, in the way we perceive and respond to the unfolding of life itself? Could it be that the key to finding inner peace lies in transforming the way we view and relate to the suffering that inevitably arises? Buddhist philosophy, which has endured for over 2 millennia, offers us profound insights into the nature of suffering and its causes. More importantly, it guides us toward liberation, not through escaping life's challenges, but by understanding them with wisdom and compassion. In Buddhism, the path to peace is not about avoiding suffering, but about learning how to navigate it with grace, clarity, and equanimity. In this exploration, we will journey together through the core teachings of Buddhism, a philosophy that is not just a set of abstract principles, but a practical guide for daily living. These teachings are not reserved for monks or scholars, but are a source of wisdom that can transform the lives of ordinary people, particularly those of us who have lived through the cycles of joy, sorrow, gain, and loss. For those who find themselves in the later chapters of life, these teachings offer a path not just to understanding the nature of suffering, but to transcending it. The Buddha's teachings are as much about the mind as they are about the world around us. They reveal to us the truth that we are not bound by the external forces that seem to dictate our lives. Instead, it is our relationship to those forces, the way we attach to them, fear them, or resist them, that shapes our suffering. With this understanding, we are invited to turn inward, to cultivate a deep awareness of our own mental and emotional patterns, and ultimately to transform them. The journey we embark on today is not one of blind faith, but one of discovery. Through the lens of Buddhist teachings, we will uncover how we can live with greater mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom. These teachings are not meant to escape reality, but to fully engage with it in a way that brings us peace, no matter the storms that life may bring. So let us take this journey together. A journey that invites us to turn our attention inward, to reflect deeply on the nature of suffering, and to find the peace that is already within us. As we explore these profound teachings, may we begin to see that the path to true freedom lies not in the avoidance of pain, but in our willingness to embrace it with open hearts and clear minds. This is the beginning of a transformation, not just of how we think, but of how we live, how we experience the world, and how we come to understand our own place in it. And in that understanding, we may discover that the peace we seek has been with us all along, waiting for us to awaken to it. Chapter 2. The Nature of Suffering and Its Causes. Why do we suffer? Suffering is woven into the very fabric of human existence. It manifests in many forms: the sharp sting of physical pain, the ache of emotional loss, the quiet sorrow of a missed opportunity, or the deep existential angst that lingers when we face the inevitable truth of aging and death. It is something that touches us all, regardless of our background, wealth, or status. Yet, for many of us, the reasons behind this suffering remain elusive, and we often find ourselves caught in the cycle without understanding why it persists. Buddhism, with its deep and compassionate insights, begins with a simple yet profound recognition. Dukkha, or suffering, is an inherent part of life. However, the Buddha did not merely acknowledge suffering as something to be passively endured. Instead, he sought to understand its root causes and offered a path to transcend it. The term dukkha in Buddhist philosophy encompasses not just physical pain, but also the deeper emotional and psychological suffering that arises from our mental afflictions, our cravings, attachments, and ignorance. At the heart of the Buddha's teachings lies the understanding that suffering is not an accident, nor is it something that happens to us randomly. It arises from within us, shaped by the ways we perceive and interact with the world around us. Our suffering is often a result of the way we cling to things, expecting permanence in a world that is inherently transient. We attach ourselves to people, possessions, ideas, and identities, believing that these things will bring us lasting happiness. Yet in doing so, we set ourselves up for inevitable disappointment because nothing in this world is permanent. The Buddha taught that the root causes of our suffering are threefold: tanha, desire; dosa, aversion; and moha, ignorance. These are often referred to as the three poisons because they poison our minds, clouding our judgment, distorting our perceptions, and keeping us trapped in cycles of craving and resistance. 1. Desire, tanha. Our desires are insatiable, always pulling us towards things we believe will bring us happiness. We crave pleasure, success, security, and approval. But this craving, the Buddha taught, is the root of much of our suffering. For example, we may desire good health, yet when our bodies inevitably age or face illness, we experience frustration and fear. This attachment to an idea of how things should be, perfect, unchanging, brings only pain. 2. Aversion, dosa. While we crave certain things, we also experience aversion to others, things we fear or dislike. We push away what causes us discomfort, pain, or uncertainty. Yet this resistance only strengthens our suffering. When we push away the reality of life's inevitable losses, or the changes we can't control, we end up in a constant state of inner conflict. The Buddha taught that our aversions arise from a lack of understanding of the impermanent nature of all things. The more we fight against the world, the more we deepen our suffering. 3. Ignorance, moha. The third poison is ignorance, which refers not just to a lack of knowledge, but to a deeper misunderstanding of the nature of reality. We are ignorant of the impermanence of all things, the interconnectedness of all beings, and the fact that there is no fixed, permanent self. This ignorance is the root of both our cravings and our aversions, and it keeps us bound to the cycle of suffering. When we fail to see things as they truly are, we make decisions that perpetuate our pain. In reflecting on my own life, I am reminded of a dear friend, an elderly man who faced his later years with a deep fear of losing his independence. He had always prided himself on his ability to care for himself, to make his own decisions, and to navigate life on his own terms. Yet, as his health began to decline, he grew anxious and fearful of becoming dependent on others. He couldn't bear the thought of relying on his children, friends, or even caregivers. This fear became a heavy burden, weighing on his mind and heart. What my friend did not realize at the time was that his suffering was not caused by the mere fact of losing his independence. Rather, it was his attachment to the idea of independence itself that caused him such distress. He believed that being self-reliant was not just a preference, but an essential part of his identity. He identified so strongly with his ability to stand on his own 2 feet that any suggestion of needing help felt like a direct attack on his sense of self-worth. The Buddha's teachings on suffering, particularly the concept of non-attachment, eventually helped him see this truth. Freedom does not lie in clinging to a permanent state of independence, but in letting go of the need to define ourselves by any one condition. True freedom comes not from grasping onto what we think we need to be happy, but from releasing our attachment to these fleeting notions. Through this understanding, my friend began to find peace in his changing circumstances. He learned to embrace the support of others without feeling diminished by it. In doing so, he discovered that true independence lies in the ability to live with grace and acceptance, regardless of the external conditions. The Buddha's insights into suffering are not just theoretical or philosophical. They are deeply practical. They ask us to look within, to question the beliefs and attachments that shape our experience, and to release the mental afflictions that keep us trapped in dissatisfaction. Through mindfulness, meditation, and a commitment to understanding the true nature of our minds, we can begin to unravel the causes of our suffering and move toward a life of greater peace and contentment. In the end, the Buddha's teachings invite us to live with awareness, to recognize when we are clinging, when we are resisting, and when we are acting out of ignorance. With this awareness, we can begin to transform our relationship to suffering, not by avoiding it, but by understanding its roots and choosing to respond with wisdom and compassion. It is in this response that we find the path to liberation and the true peace that transcends the transient nature of life. Chapter 3: The Four Noble Truths, the Path to Liberation. The Four Noble Truths, at the very core of Buddhist philosophy, offer a profound and practical map for navigating the complexities of life. These truths are not abstract ideas or distant doctrines. They are essential teachings that illuminate the nature of suffering and offer a clear path toward its cessation. The Buddha's genius lies in his ability to distill the essence of human experience into 4 truths, each offering deep wisdom that can transform how we experience the world. At first glance, the 4 noble truths might seem simple, but they are profound in their simplicity. Each one is a gateway to deeper understanding, revealing how suffering arises, how it can be ended, and how we can walk the path that leads to liberation. To truly grasp their meaning, we must move beyond intellectual knowledge and begin to apply these teachings to our everyday lives, recognizing how they manifest in our own struggles, hopes, and fears. 1. The truth of suffering, dukkha. The Buddha's first noble truth is an undeniable reality. Dukkha, or suffering, is an inherent part of life. This truth doesn't merely acknowledge that suffering exists. It underscores that suffering is woven into the very fabric of existence. From the moment we are born, we are subject to a world of dissatisfaction, discomfort, and pain. But what does dukkha really mean? It's not just about physical pain, such as illness or injury. It encompasses much more: emotional pain, the frustration of unmet desires, the anxiety that arises from an uncertain future, and the sorrow of loss. Dukkha also refers to the subtle but pervasive dissatisfaction that comes from the transitory nature of life. Even when we have moments of happiness, they are fleeting. We savor the good, but it slips away, and we are left craving more, always in pursuit of something that is just out of reach. Consider the example of aging. As we grow older, our bodies change. We may lose strength, our faces may wrinkle, and our once boundless energy may diminish. For many, this brings a deep sense of loss, even grief. But the Buddha's teaching invites us to look at this reality without fear. Aging is not a personal failure or a cruel punishment. It is a natural part of life, one that we all must face. Understanding dukkha helps us accept that suffering is not something external to us, but an intrinsic part of the cycle of life. 2. The truth of the cause of suffering. The second noble truth takes us a step further. It reveals the cause of suffering. The Buddha taught that the root of all suffering lies in our cravings, tanha, and our aversions, dosa, both of which arise from ignorance, moha. These three poisons, desire, aversion, and ignorance, keep us trapped in a cycle of suffering and dissatisfaction. Desire, tanha, our cravings are insatiable. We long for things we believe will bring us happiness, wealth, success, relationships, possessions. But no matter how much we acquire or achieve, there is always the sense that something is missing, that there is more to be had. Our desires drive us to chase after fleeting pleasures, and in doing so, we create our own suffering. Every time we fixate on an object of desire, we reinforce our attachment to it, believing that it holds the key to our happiness. Aversion, dosa. On the flip side of desire, we experience aversion, our resistance to the things we dislike or fear. We push away pain, suffering, and discomfort, whether it is emotional, physical, or psychological. But by doing so, we deepen our suffering. Every time we try to deny the reality of what we don't want, we trap ourselves in conflict and resistance. The more we struggle against what is, the more entrenched our suffering becomes. Ignorance, moha. Perhaps the most insidious of the three poisons is ignorance. This is not simply a lack of knowledge, but a deeper misunderstanding of the nature of reality. We fail to see that everything is impermanent, that the self is not a fixed entity, and that all things are interconnected. Our ignorance keeps us bound to our desires and aversions, clouding our ability to see things as they truly are. It is through ignorance that we continue to seek happiness in things that are transient, and it is ignorance that causes us to resist the inevitable flow of life. 3. The truth of the cessation of suffering. The third noble truth offers a beacon of hope. Suffering can be overcome. The Buddha did not leave us in despair with the acknowledgement of suffering's ubiquity. He also taught that liberation from suffering is possible. This cessation of suffering is known as nirvana, a state of peace, freedom, and enlightenment. Nirvana is often misunderstood as an escape from reality, a kind of heavenly realm where we are free from pain and conflict. But in truth, nirvana is the end of the mental afflictions that cause suffering. It is a state of liberation from the cravings and aversions that bind us. It is a freedom that arises not by rejecting life, but by accepting it fully as it is, without attachment. In practical terms, achieving nirvana means cultivating a mind that is free from the poisons of desire, aversion, and ignorance. It involves letting go of our attachment to outcomes, to identities, to the fleeting pleasures that we think will bring us lasting happiness. It is the realization that happiness is not something to be acquired, but something that arises naturally when we stop clinging to the impermanent. For the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. The final noble truth offers the key to ending suffering. The Noble Eightfold Path. This path is not a single action or belief, but a comprehensive guide to living a life that leads to the cessation of suffering. The Eightfold Path is often divided into three core aspects: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. Right view, understanding the nature of suffering and the impermanent nature of life. This is the first step toward liberation, right intention. Cultivating intentions that are rooted in compassion, kindness, and wisdom, rather than in selfish desire or aversion. Right speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and with integrity. Our words should reflect our intention to bring peace, not harm. Right action, acting in ways that are ethical, avoiding harm to others, and living in alignment with the values of compassion and nonviolence. Right livelihood, engaging in work that is honest, ethical, and contributes to the welfare of others, rather than exploiting or harming others for personal gain. Right effort, making a conscious effort to cultivate wholesome qualities and abandon unwholesome ones. Right mindfulness, developing awareness of the present moment, observing our thoughts, emotions, and actions without attachment or aversion. Right concentration, cultivating deep focus and meditation to develop the mental clarity necessary for insight and wisdom. The Noble Eightfold Path is not a quick fix or a formula for success. It is a gradual process of transformation that requires consistent effort, mindfulness, and compassion. Each step of the path leads us closer to a state of freedom and peace. As we practice the path, we begin to see the world and ourselves more clearly, letting go of the attachments that cause suffering and embracing the impermanence of life with equanimity. In the end, the Four Noble Truths are not just philosophical concepts. They are practical tools for living a life of peace, compassion, and wisdom. By understanding the nature of suffering, its causes, and the path to its cessation, we are empowered to transform our experience of life and move closer to the ultimate goal of liberation. This is the path the Buddha walked, and it is a path that we can walk as well, one step at a time with each mindful breath. Chapter 4: Anatta, the Illusion of the Self. One of the most profound and transformative teachings in Buddhism is the concept of anatta, often translated as non-self. It speaks to the heart of the human condition, the deep-seated belief that we are separate, independent, and unchanging entities. We spend much of our lives building and protecting an image of ourselves, clinging to this sense of identity as if it were something permanent, something fixed. But Buddhism teaches us that this self is nothing but an illusion, a mental construct that has no true existence. The reality, according to the Buddha, is that there is no permanent, unchanging self. Instead, what we call the self is merely a collection of constantly shifting thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. This teaching cuts to the core of what it means to be human. It challenges the very way we perceive ourselves and our lives. In a culture that prizes individuality, self-expression, and the idea of owning one's identity, the idea that there is no solid, permanent self can feel jarring and even unsettling. Yet it is in this understanding of anatta that we begin to find true freedom. At the heart of anatta is the realization that everything, our bodies, our minds, our emotions, our identities, is in constant flux. Nothing remains the same from one moment to the next. When we grasp this, we see that the self we have been clinging to is merely an illusion, a momentary aggregation of ever-changing elements. The body we identify with is not static, but undergoes continuous change. Our thoughts are not constant, but ebb and flow like waves on the surface of an ocean. Our emotions rise and fall, often unpredictably like the changing tides. There is no fixed I at the center of all these fleeting experiences. There is only change, impermanence, and flow. One of the most striking ways this teaching becomes apparent is through our relationship with our bodies, especially as we age. From the time we are born, we are deeply connected to the physical form we inhabit. Our bodies shape how we see ourselves, how we move through the world, and how we relate to others. As we age, this connection to the body often becomes more pronounced. We start to feel the effects of time, aches, pains, reduced mobility, and we may begin to identify with these physical changes. It is easy to fall into the trap of thinking that as our bodies weaken, we are losing ourselves. We might ask, who am I if not this strong, active, capable body? And when the body no longer serves us in the same way, we may feel a sense of disconnection, even despair. Yet the Buddha's teaching on anatta offers a liberating perspective. The body, like everything else, is impermanent. It is a temporary vessel that changes with time. The more we cling to the idea of our body as I or mine, the more we deepen our suffering when it inevitably changes or deteriorates. In truth, the body is not the self, but merely an element in the continuous process of life. It is like a garment we wear for a time, but it is not who we truly are. This understanding of anatta can be especially profound as we move through the later stages of life. When we no longer have the same physical strength, when our appearance changes, or when illness strikes, we can find ourselves questioning our identity. But the Buddha reminds us that the self is not bound to the body. The self is not fixed in time or place. It is not bound by the body's aging or its frailties. Understanding this frees us from the attachment to our physical form, allowing us to experience life with greater peace and flexibility. Let us take a moment to reflect on the mental anguish many experience as their bodies change with age. We may fear the loss of vitality, of independence, or even of social value. But when we deeply internalize the teaching of anatta, we begin to see that this fear arises from the belief in a permanent self that must always stay the same. In reality, the self is not a static thing. It is a process, a flow of experiences, and it can continue to evolve as we age. A powerful example of this is seen in the stories of elderly individuals who, after experiencing physical decline, find new ways to engage with life. Rather than clinging to the idea of themselves as active, strong, or youthful, they begin to identify with something deeper, perhaps their wisdom, their compassion, or their ability to find joy in the present moment. The more they release the attachment to their bodies and their identities, the more freedom and peace they experience. This teaching does not mean we should neglect the body or deny the importance of taking care of it. The Buddha was not asking us to abandon our physical selves. Rather, he was urging us to see through the illusion that we are the body, that we are these transient experiences. When we understand that the body is not the self, we can begin to live with greater equanimity, accepting the changes that come with age and finding a deeper sense of peace in the face of life's inevitable transitions. The true self, according to Buddhism, is not the body, nor is it the mind. It is a deeper awareness, a consciousness that is beyond the ever-changing fluctuations of thought and emotion. This awareness is not bound by time, nor is it subject to the same laws of impermanence that govern the body and the mind. When we begin to cultivate awareness of this deeper self, we no longer need to cling to the transient aspects of who we think we are. We can rest in the truth that, at our core, we are part of something much greater than the ego we have constructed. Understanding anatta opens the door to profound liberation. When we let go of the illusion of a permanent self, we free ourselves from the cycle of attachment and suffering. We begin to live more fully, more freely, and with greater compassion for ourselves and others. The illusion of the self, when seen clearly, becomes the key to true peace. And in this peace, we find a deep sense of connection with all of life, beyond the boundaries of time and form. As we move through the years, the practice of understanding anatta becomes increasingly important. It teaches us to release our attachment to the physical, to the mental, and to the idea of a fixed identity. In doing so, we discover the freedom that comes with accepting the impermanence of life, and we open ourselves to the deeper, unchanging awareness that resides within us all. This is the liberation that the Buddha spoke of, the liberation from the illusion of the self, and the realization that true peace arises not from holding on, but from letting go. Chapter 5, Anicca, Embracing Impermanence. One of the most profound and often unsettling teachings in Buddhism is the concept of anicca, or impermanence. Closely linked to anatta, the teaching on non-self, impermanence serves as a cornerstone of Buddhist wisdom, offering us a deeper understanding of the transitory nature of life. The Buddha taught that all phenomena, without exception, are in constant flux. Nothing, not even for a single moment, remains the same. The earth beneath our feet shifts, the seasons change, our bodies grow older, and even our thoughts and emotions are in constant motion. This reality of change is unavoidable, and yet it is a truth we often fight against, desperately trying to hold on to what we have, to what we know, or to who we think we are. The concept of anicca invites us to face this undeniable truth. Nothing is permanent, not even the present moment. This is a truth that can be liberating and terrifying at once. On the one hand, it brings a sense of freedom from the attachments and desires that tie us to a fixed and rigid way of being. On the other hand, it can also evoke fear and resistance, as we realize that everything we hold dear, from our relationships to our possessions, will eventually fade away. As I reflect on my own experiences with aging, I find that the teaching of anicca holds both wisdom and challenge. With each passing year, our bodies change in ways we can't ignore. Our energy diminishes, our skin shows signs of wear, and the vigor of youth slowly fades. At the same time, our roles in the world evolve. We shift from being the ones who give care to those who need it, from being active participants in the world to, at times, becoming observers of life unfolding. The impermanence of our physical bodies and our roles in society is undeniable, and it can stir up deep feelings of loss and anxiety. Yet, Buddhism offers a path through this natural process of aging, reminding us that impermanence is not something to be feared. Rather, it is an essential part of the human experience, and embracing it can lead to profound peace. When we resist the truth of impermanence, we set ourselves up for frustration and suffering. We cling to the fleeting, attempting to hold on to what is passing away. We are attached to our youthful bodies, to our social status, to our achievements, and in doing so, we suffer when these things inevitably change or disappear. But by recognizing and embracing impermanence, we free ourselves from this cycle of clinging. One of the most powerful lessons I've learned as I've watched the people around me grow older is that peace does not come from holding onto what we have, but from understanding that change is not the enemy. It is the nature of life itself. The more we resist the passage of time, the more suffering we invite. The more we cling to what we cannot control, the more we increase our stress, anxiety, and fear. Yet, when we accept that all things are impermanent, our bodies, our relationships, our very lives, we begin to find a deep sense of liberation. Consider the elderly person who, as their physical health declines, struggles to come to terms with their changing abilities. At first, they may fight against it, grieving the loss of their strength, their independence, their vitality. But through mindfulness and wisdom, they can begin to shift their perspective. Instead of focusing on what is lost, They can learn to appreciate the preciousness of each moment, understanding that each phase of life has its own unique beauty. The wrinkles that appear on their face are a testament to a life well lived. The slowing of their steps is an invitation to move with more intention, more presence. In this way, impermanence becomes a source of wisdom, a guide that leads us toward greater mindfulness and acceptance. In many ways, embracing anicca is like learning to surf on the waves of change. The more we resist, the more we are tossed around, struggling to keep our balance. But when we accept that the waves will come, whether we like it or not, we can learn to ride them with grace. In the same way, when we embrace impermanence, we begin to flow with the natural rhythms of life, rather than fighting against them. This doesn't mean we give up or become passive in the face of change. Far from it. Rather, it means we engage with life more fully, recognizing that every moment is precious precisely because it will not last forever. This deep awareness of the impermanent nature of all things allows us to appreciate them more deeply, to savor our experiences with a sense of gratitude and reverence. When we embrace impermanence, we also learn to let go of expectations. We stop trying to control the uncontrollable, and in doing so, we free ourselves from the constant anxiety that comes from striving to hold on to something that is always slipping through our fingers. We begin to appreciate the present moment as it is, complete, whole, and fleeting, and in that appreciation we find peace. The Buddha's teaching on anicca does not ask us to resign ourselves to passivity or defeat, but to cultivate an active awareness that change is not something to fear, but something to embrace. It asks us to see the beauty in the fleeting, to find wisdom in the impermanent, and to live fully in the present moment. By embracing impermanence, we can release our attachments to the past and future, and instead open ourselves to the fullness of life as it is, here and now. As we grow older, as our bodies change, as our relationships evolve, anicca invites us to reflect on the transient nature of all things. It encourages us to find peace not in trying to hold on, but in learning to let go. It teaches us that the greatest freedom comes not from resisting the natural flow of life, but from aligning ourselves with it. And in doing so, we find a sense of peace that is not dependent on external circumstances, but rooted in our ability to embrace the impermanent nature of all things. Chapter 6: The Noble Eightfold Path, the Practical Guide to Awakening. The Noble Eightfold Path is often described as the Buddha's guide to living a life of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. It is not merely a set of abstract concepts or lofty ideals, but a practical framework that offers us a way to transform our daily lives. When followed with sincerity and dedication, the Eightfold Path leads us toward the cessation of suffering and the attainment of enlightenment. It offers us a road map to living with greater peace, compassion, and clarity. This path is not a single action, nor is it a destination. Rather, it is a gradual process of growth, self-discovery, and inner transformation. Each of the 8 factors of the path builds upon the others, and together they create a holistic approach to life that touches every aspect of our being, from how we think to how we speak to how we act in the world. Right view, understanding the nature of reality. The first step on the Noble Eightfold Path is cultivating right view, or understanding the nature of reality. This is the foundation upon which all other aspects of the path are built. To see clearly is to understand that life is impermanent, anicca, that suffering is an inherent part of existence, dukkha, and that there is no permanent, unchanging self, anatta. With right view, we begin to see things as they truly are, rather than through the distorted lens of our desires, fears, or attachments. This understanding is not merely intellectual but experiential. It's the kind of wisdom that arises when we allow ourselves to directly observe our thoughts, feelings, and actions without judgment, realizing that all things are connected and constantly changing. When we cultivate right view, we stop seeking lasting satisfaction in things that are inherently impermanent. Instead, we begin to live with an awareness of the fluid nature of life, embracing it with all its challenges and joys, knowing that everything, including ourselves, is in a constant state of flux. Right intention, cultivating positive thoughts and intentions. Once we have cultivated right view, we move to right intention, which involves cultivating positive thoughts and intentions. Our intentions are the seeds from which our actions and experiences grow. If our intentions are rooted in greed, hatred, or delusion, we create suffering for ourselves and others. But when our intentions are rooted in love, compassion, and wisdom, we create a foundation for peace and understanding. Right intention is about setting our mind in the right direction. It is the commitment to practice kindness, generosity, and compassion, and to transform harmful thought patterns into those that benefit ourselves and others. This means letting go of harmful desires, whether it's attachment to material possessions, power, or even our identity, and replacing them with intentions of peace, wisdom, and loving kindness. As we move through life, the intentions we cultivate will influence how we interact with others and how we respond to situations. When we practice right intention, we begin to live with purpose, aligned with the deeper values of compassion and understanding. Right speech, speaking truthfully and kindly. The next aspect of the path is right speech, which is one of the most powerful ways to bring about positive change in our lives and the world around us. Our words have the power to heal or to harm, to build up or to tear down. Through right speech, we commit to speaking truthfully, kindly, and with integrity. This means refraining from lying, gossiping, or engaging in divisive speech. It also means being mindful of the tone, intention, and impact of our words. Right speech is not just about saying what is true, but saying it in a way that is compassionate and constructive. In our relationships, whether with family, friends, or strangers, our words can be a source of great healing or harm. Practicing right speech means being careful with what we say, understanding that words are not just tools for communication, but expressions of our thoughts and hearts. By practicing mindful speech, we create a space for honesty and understanding, free from the divisiveness and negativity that often cloud our interactions. Right action. Acting ethically and with compassion. Following right speech is right action, which involves acting in ways that are ethical and compassionate. Our actions reflect our inner state and can either contribute to peace and harmony or perpetuate suffering. The Buddha's teachings on right action encourage us to avoid actions that harm others, whether through violence, deceit, or exploitation, and to instead act with kindness, generosity, and respect for all beings. This means living in alignment with ethical principles such as not taking what is not given, refraining from causing harm, and living with integrity. Right action asks us to embody compassion in the world, not just in our thoughts and words, but in our everyday actions. Whether it's how we treat the people we interact with, how we care for the environment, or how we engage in our communities, our actions speak volumes about who we are and what we stand for. Right livelihood. Earning a living in a way that is not harmful to others. In right livelihood, the Buddha addresses the way we earn our living. This is a teaching that is particularly relevant in a world where many professions may unintentionally contribute to harm. whether through exploitation, deceit, or environmental destruction. Right livelihood urges us to earn a living in a way that is ethical and causes no harm to others. Choosing a career or occupation that aligns with the values of compassion, kindness, and integrity is a key aspect of the Eightfold Path. It's not just about financial gain, but about contributing to the well-being of others and the greater good. When our livelihood is aligned with ethical principles, we find that we are not just supporting ourselves financially, but are also contributing to a more just and compassionate world. Right effort, striving to develop wholesome qualities and abandon unwholesome ones. Right effort is the practice of actively cultivating positive mental states and abandoning harmful ones. It requires sustained effort, discipline, and mindfulness to develop wholesome qualities such as kindness, patience, and wisdom, while simultaneously working to release unwholesome states like anger, greed, and ignorance. This effort is not about forcing change or being harsh with ourselves, but about recognizing our habits and tendencies and making a conscious effort to shift toward what is beneficial. Right effort encourages us to cultivate a positive mental environment where virtues such as generosity, mindfulness, and compassion can flourish. Right mindfulness, being aware of the present moment without attachment. The practice of right mindfulness is central to the Eightfold Path. It involves being fully present in the moment, aware of our thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations, without attachment or judgment. Right mindfulness asks us to observe ourselves and our surroundings with clarity and understanding, free from the distractions of the past or the future. Through mindfulness, we come to see our habits, reactions, and patterns more clearly. We begin to understand that our thoughts are not who we are. They are simply fleeting mental phenomena. By practicing mindfulness, we develop the capacity to respond to life with wisdom, rather than reacting impulsively from habitual patterns. Right concentration, developing focused attention through meditation. Finally, right concentration is the practice of developing deep mental focus and clarity through meditation. This is where the path converges with the practice of meditation, allowing us to cultivate a calm, concentrated mind that is free from distraction and confusion. Through right concentration, we develop the ability to focus our attention deeply on one object or idea, leading to greater insight and wisdom. Meditation is the tool that sharpens the mind and allows us to see through the illusions that cloud our understanding. With right concentration, we develop a mind that is stable, clear, and deeply insightful, one that can penetrate the true nature of reality. Chapter 7: Meditation, Cultivating Wisdom and Peace. Meditation lies at the heart of Buddhist practice, serving as both a tool and a path toward deep inner transformation. It is not simply a mental exercise, but a profound practice that helps us cultivate wisdom, clarity, and peace. Through meditation, we train the mind to develop mindfulness and concentration, two essential qualities that allow us to gain insight into the true nature of our minds and the world around us. This practice teaches us to observe our thoughts, emotions, and sensations without attachment, leading to a deeper understanding of ourselves and a more peaceful way of living. In Buddhism, meditation is not just about quieting the mind. It is about seeing things as they truly are. When we meditate, we begin to develop the ability to step back from the constant flow of thoughts and distractions that typically dominate our consciousness. We learn to observe without judgment, without trying to push away uncomfortable thoughts or grasp at pleasant ones. Instead of being swept away by our mental and emotional turbulence, we start to cultivate a space of awareness and calm. One of the most important aspects of meditation is mindfulness, the practice of paying attention to the present moment with full awareness. Mindfulness is not just about observing our external surroundings, but becoming acutely aware of the inner landscape of our minds. Through mindfulness, we learn to recognize the fleeting nature of our thoughts and emotions, understanding that they are not fixed parts of ourselves, but temporary phenomena that arise and pass away. For instance, when we sit in meditation and observe our thoughts, we begin to notice how quickly they change. One moment, we may be caught up in a thought about the past. The next, we might be imagining a future scenario. But as we deepen our practice, we come to understand that these thoughts are not us. They are simply passing clouds in the sky of our awareness. By observing them without attachment or judgment, we can cultivate a sense of detachment and equanimity. This doesn't mean we become indifferent or disengaged from life, but that we begin to respond to life from a place of wisdom rather than reactivity. Meditation also helps us develop concentration, the ability to focus the mind with clarity and depth. In our everyday lives, our minds are often scattered, pulled in many directions at once. Concentration allows us to bring our attention to a single point, whether it is the breath, a mantra, or a particular object of focus. With practice, concentration deepens, and the mind becomes less distracted, more present, and more attuned to the reality of the present moment. A powerful example of how meditation can transform our experience comes from a dear friend of mine who struggled with chronic pain in his later years. For years, he had been living with discomfort, and the pain became an overwhelming part of his existence. As his condition worsened, his frustration and suffering grew. But through the practice of mindfulness meditation, he found a way to change his relationship to pain. Instead of identifying with the pain or seeing it as something that defined him, he began to observe it, acknowledging it without judgment, without resistance, without attachment. This shift in perspective did not eliminate the pain, but it transformed his experience of it. By recognizing that pain, like all things, was impermanent and that he was not defined by it, my friend found a profound sense of peace, even in the midst of his physical discomfort. This is the power of meditation. It doesn't necessarily remove life's difficulties, but it allows us to change the way we experience them. It teaches us that we are not our pain, our thoughts, or our emotions. They are simply transient experiences that come and go. Meditation also cultivates compassion and empathy. When we learn to observe our own minds with greater clarity, we begin to understand the minds of others more deeply. We become more attuned to the suffering of those around us, and our natural response is one of kindness and compassion. Meditation allows us to cultivate a heart that is open, not closed off by the walls of ego or attachment. In a world that often feels divided and conflicted, meditation offers us a way to soften our hearts and open our minds to the suffering of others. As we cultivate compassion for ourselves, we naturally extend that compassion to others, creating a more harmonious and understanding world. Moreover, meditation provides a way to reconnect with the deeper dimensions of our lives, dimensions that are often lost in the busyness and distractions of modern existence. In a culture that prizes productivity and outward success, meditation offers us the gift of stillness, a space where we can simply be. In this stillness, we reconnect with our true nature, beyond the identities and roles we play in the world. This connection with our deeper self brings clarity, peace, and a sense of purpose that transcends the fleeting concerns of daily life. Meditation also deepens our understanding of impermanence, anicca, non-self, anatta, and suffering, dukkha. As we observe our thoughts and emotions during meditation, we see how they arise and pass away. We experience the impermanent nature of all things, and we begin to understand that clinging to anything, whether it is a thought, an emotion, or a physical sensation, only leads to suffering. Through this practice, we learn to let go, to release our attachment to the passing moment, and to cultivate a state of acceptance and peace. Meditation is not a quick fix or an escape from the challenges of life. It is a practice that requires patience, consistency, and discipline. But over time, meditation offers us a profound shift in how we relate to ourselves and the world. It provides a pathway to greater wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. It is a practice that enables us to awaken to the true nature of reality and to cultivate a life that is rooted in presence, clarity, and love. In the end, the transformative power of meditation lies not in its ability to make us feel better or remove our problems, but in its capacity to help us see more clearly and live more authentically. By practicing meditation, we learn to embrace the present moment with all its joys and difficulties, and we cultivate a mind that is free from the turmoil of attachments and aversions. Meditation is the path to awakening, a path that leads us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and a more compassionate engagement with the world. Chapter 8 and the final chapter, The Path to Liberation. Buddhist philosophy offers us not just a theory or a belief system, but a profound and practical guide to living a life free from suffering. The Buddha's teachings lay out a clear path for us to understand the true nature of suffering and its causes, and more importantly, how to overcome them. This path is not a distant dream or an unattainable ideal. It is a roadmap for living a more peaceful, compassionate, and awakened life, starting right now. As we journey through life, we inevitably encounter challenges. Aging, loss, change, these are part of the human experience. Yet, the wisdom of Buddhism teaches us that these challenges do not have to overwhelm us. Instead of seeing the difficulties of life as obstacles that diminish us, we can view them as opportunities for growth. The teachings of the Buddha offer us the tools to navigate these challenges with wisdom and grace. As we grow older, our bodies may change, and the roles we play in the world may shift. It's easy to become attached to the past, to the self we once were, or to fear what is yet to come. But Buddhism invites us to let go of these attachments and embrace the impermanent nature of life. By understanding anicca, the truth of impermanence, we learn to flow with the changes rather than resisting them. We begin to appreciate the present moment, knowing that it is all we truly have. Mindfulness is the key to this shift. By being present and fully engaged with each moment, we are no longer swept away by regrets about the past or anxieties about the future. Instead, we discover a sense of peace in the now. The simple act of breathing, of being aware of our surroundings, of being kind to ourselves and others, these become acts of liberation. Through mindfulness, we find the ability to be fully alive, regardless of our circumstances. At any stage of life, but especially as we age, the Buddha's teachings offer us a way to transcend the fears and limitations that often arise with the passage of time. We do not need to cling to what is fading or mourn what has been lost. Instead, we are invited to celebrate the impermanence of all things and find freedom in the space that exists between attachment and detachment. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that the path to liberation is not something we achieve someday in the distant future. It is something we can practice today. Every step of the Noble Eightfold Path, whether it's cultivating right view, right action, or right mindfulness, offers us a way to transform our experience of life. It teaches us that peace is not a destination, but a way of being, a way of relating to ourselves and the world with clarity, compassion, and openness. As we practice the Noble Eightfold Path, we begin to notice that our lives take on a different quality. We no longer live in the grip of our desires or aversions, nor are we controlled by our fear of impermanence. Instead, we embrace life as it is, with all its beauty and its challenges, knowing that we have the capacity to respond with wisdom and compassion. This is the essence of liberation. To live in harmony with the world, not because the world is perfect, but because we are at peace with its imperfections. In the end, the Buddha's teachings offer us a profound way to transform the inevitable process of aging into a journey of awakening. As we face the changes that come with time, we can choose to embrace them with mindfulness and grace. By incorporating the teachings of the Eightfold Path into our daily lives, we can find joy in the present moment, regardless of the external circumstances. The path to liberation is not far away. It is right here, available to us now. Through the cultivation of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline, we can find lasting peace and happiness, no matter our age or the challenges life brings. This is the promise of Buddhism, a path to freedom, not just in some distant future, but in every moment we choose to walk it.